Once hailed as a creative genius for weaving a fantasy world that many fans became attached to at a very young age, George Lucas became a pariah when he released the hated special editions of the original trilogy in 1997. He then added insult to injury with yet more changes in the 2004 DVD releases of the same trilogy. What was so bad about the special edition releases? Well, George had a vision for the Star Wars movies that special effects technology just wasn't up to in the late 70s and early 80s. Once that technology caught up with his imagination in the late 90s, however, George saw the opportunity to go back and fix his movies to bring them more in line with his original vision. Now, many of the changes were minor aesthetic adjustments where inconsequential background stuff was altered to make it look more exotic. However, there were also major changes made to some of the most iconic scenes in the movies, drastically changing their character in the process. Longtime fans revolted against these changes because, even though they were George Lucas's movies, they felt like Star Wars now belonged to the public at large. The franchise had become a huge pop culture institution, and the conflict between that reality and George Lucas's willingness to continually alter the material to suit his own tastes became a point of contention for years to come. These fans refused to accept any of the new stuff as canon, despite George Lucas's refusal to sell a separate line of classic versions of the movies for fans who preferred the original cuts. He looked at the original cuts as unfinished versions and was confident, or deluded, enough to believe that longtime fans would see it the same way. Whether you take the changes as a joke or an insult to your religion, here are some of the most glaring and irritating improvements that George Lucas made when he released the special editions in the 90s. Number 5. All the new critters running around. Though most of them thankfully didn't affect the story in any noticeable way, the original trilogy is now overrun with all manner of CGI creatures that didn't previously exist. Most of them were thrown into the background of existing scenes, making them jarringly out of place with the dated special effects they're surrounded by. From the big cow things the stormtroopers were riding while searching for R2-D2 and C-3PO on Tatooine, to the assortment of creatures running around Luke's speeder as he and his friends approached Mos Eisley, to the frog thing that eats a bug and then belches outside Jabbas' palace in Return of the Jedi, these things take you out of the moment and ruin the experience by so boldly demanding your attention. Number 4. The monster in the Sarlacc Pit. Being 30 feet wide, lined with rows upon rows of razor-sharp teeth, and possessing a long grabbing tongue apparently didn't make the Sarlacc Pit menacing enough. So when George Lucas reworked Return of the Jedi, he decided to try and spruce it up a bit. So Jabba, his buddies, and his captives get to the Sarlacc Pit. The fight breaks out like before, but when the victims start drawing close to the pit itself, something that looks like one of the piranha plants from Super Mario Bros. Is in the middle of the pit, hungrily snapping at the ankles of anyone unlucky enough to follow into its clutches. Not only did the addition of the piranha plant make the Sarlacc Pit look a lot sillier, it actually took away from the scary factor. One of the things that made the Sarlacc Pit cool was that you heard what happened when you fell in it, and you had to use your imagination to fill in the rest. Actually seeing the somewhat non-threatening looking monster inside it was counterproductive to the imagined horrors that lay within. Number 3. The dance number at Jabba's palace. I, of course, don't mean the original scene where the band is playing and the lizard tail head girl gets dropped into the pit with the Rancor. What I am speaking of is the CGI version of the singer Cy Snoodles, who was a Jim Henson puppet in the original, prancing out and doing a dance number complete with her backup singers, the Snoodlettes, and then being joined by a CGI furry marshmallow guy singing. So, much like the Sarlacc Pit, this change also took a scene with serious tone and turned it into Nick Jr. The original music and lack of the CGI singers fit in perfectly with Jabba's palace originally. It was gritty and seedy, and seemed like the perfect background atmosphere for an erotic dancer being sent to her death for mildly offending a powerful gangster. But by changing up the scene as they did, it almost makes it seem like they're saying, "Hey guys, it's party time, who wants pizza and ice cream?" Way too upbeat for the den of a vicious gangster who, by the way, just murdered somebody by dumping him into a Rancor pit. Number 2. Greedo shoots first. Now, I think even non-Star Wars fans have heard about this one. In the original version of the original movie, Greedo the bounty hunter corners Han Solo at the cantina in Mos Eisley and tries to rob him before Han just shoots him in cold blood and walks off. In the special edition version of the movie, however, they have an exchange where Greedo shoots first and Han returns fire in the blink of an eye. It makes Greedo look like a horrible shot since he missed Han from 3 feet away, but beyond that, the original scene was supposed to establish Han as a creep with low moral fiber. They apparently decided that the good guy couldn't just shoot Greedo unprovoked like that, even though that kind of cowboy approach was part of what made Han Solo cool in the first place. And number 1, the ending of Return of the Jedi. Far and away, the most in-your-face and frustrating change made to the original movies was the ending of Return of the Jedi. Now, I understood that there was as much we wanted to bring it in line with the prequel trilogy as there was we just felt like it involved in the decision-making process there, but they went way, way, way overboard. So everything's fine up until the point where Luke torches Darth Vader's corpse. The camera pans up to the sky, the fireworks go off, but instead of the charmingly native-sounding original tune played by the Ewoks, we hear a completely unfamiliar new tune that sounds like it was played by a combination of American Indians and a church choir. The original ending focused on the rebels and the Ewoks celebrating in the Ewok village in the trees, but in the special edition we also got to see celebrations on Naboo and Coruscant, the capital planet of the Empire, complete with fireworks and cheering crowds. So forget for a second that the Death Star had just been blown up mere hours earlier. Word of its destruction had apparently already spread across the galaxy. Everyone also apparently had plenty of fireworks and ships to set them off at the ready for just such an occasion. So perhaps the most noticeable change, however, were the Jedi Ghosts Luke saw when he returned to the Ewok village. Now, of course it was always Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Anakin, but the original movie had the old fat Anakin played by Sebastian Shaw. The special edition version, on the other hand, still includes all 3 Jedi, except that Hayden Christensen's head replaces Sebastian Shaw's. Well, at least they didn't replace Shaw with Hayden during the Vader death scene too, though I guess I shouldn't give them any other ideas. So, though this was presumably done to make everything match now that we actually knew what young Anakin looked like, it was the icing on the cake for what many longtime fans considered the absolute destruction of the ending of the greatest movie series of all time. Thankfully, Star Wars is now safely out of the hands of George Lucas, who is now unable to further desecrate the original trilogy any more than he already has. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave them in the comments section below, as well as any other weird or irritating changes you noticed in the special editions that I didn't cover here. If you'd like to support the Star Wars Wavelength YouTube channel, please click subscribe so you can be notified and check back in whenever new videos are posted. Thanks again for watching, and may the Force be with you, always.